DJ and PK brought to you in part by Trajan Wealth. Call Trajan Wealth today, your local trusted financial fiduciary, 801-899-7600, or visit their website at TrajanWealth.com. We are joined now by Dan Devine, senior NBA writer for Yahoo Sports. Dan, good morning.
Good morning, guys. How are we doing today?
We are doing well. Before we look forward, one question here to look back at, well, maybe at least one, maybe more than one, the Luka Doncic trade. And Danny Ainge didn't know. Are you surprised? Are you shocked? Do you think there's any way the third GM didn't know what was going on? Just your whole take on how everything went down on a surprising Saturday night.
Yeah, I was going to say, is the one question that results from the Luka Doncic trade even, can you say it on air without getting fined? I wasn't sure if there was an expletive that needed to go into that question. I'm surprised, I think the more that comes out about the nature of the transaction, it does not surprise me to learn that a third party wouldn't have been brought in until the last possible minute, because it seems like whatever the reasons are that went into this, it's got to stay in the trust tree. No one else can know. Nico Harrison and Rob Pelinka were very adamant about not getting out. And, there's been reporting suggesting that's because the Lakers have been burned in the past by trade talks getting out and becoming bigger issues. Maybe that's a question of, if you involve Clutch too early, then, Clutch obviously is an agency that has a lot of friends in the media and has been very, a lot of storylines have gone sort of largely popular and national from there. Whatever the case may be, it seems like the idea was until this is, absolutely nailed down, nobody else gets involved. And the Jazz, their role in it obviously is pivotal in that without taking on Jalen Hood-Schifino to make the finances work, it can't happen. But, it's kind of, spinning two separate plates. We're having one conversation over here and another conversation over there, and not until the last second do we connect the dots. And so that point happening and the Jazz still being able to walk away with it with some assets, it's a nice bit of business for not much effort for them. But, yeah, you do wonder if Danny Ainge got wind of that earlier, if he might have said, well, wait a second, hold on. we might want to talk about a bigger deal than this, but that evidently was not what the two principals involved wanted.
We're hearing teams like Golden State and Phoenix want to make some moves, and maybe even they make a move between themselves. I'm wondering, as I look at this, is this more of an act of desperation by these two teams trying to hang on to something that doesn't appear to be there, or can they make moves that can actually get them into contention?
I think it's a very astute observation, because as we enter Tuesday's games, we're talking about teams that are, Phoenix is 10th in the West, Golden State's 11th in the West, both 25 and 24. Now the glass half full case is they're only a couple of games out of being up in 6, and then you're talking about being out of the play-in. But I think very little we've seen since the opening weeks of the season for either Phoenix or Golden State would suggest that they're anything better than a middling team, even when they've had their best guys healthy, really. Golden State right after that, I think it was 12-3 start. But once they lost D'Anthony Melton and some of their rotation kind of got curtailed and jumbled up a little bit, they've fallen off. Obviously, Steph has missed some time. Draymond's missed some time. But even when they've had their main guys, they haven't felt overwhelming in any capacity. And then with Phoenix, it's, when you've got Durant, you're pretty good, but when you don't, you're not. And they haven't seen enough from the formation that they anticipated, where we have these three stars and everything else builds around them. They haven't gotten the results that they've needed to. Even with those three guys on the court together, with Durant, Devin Booker, and Bradley Beal on the court together, it hasn't been an overwhelming offensive machine like they had hoped it would. So you wind up with teams that are extremely expensive, that are extremely leveraged, that don't have a whole lot of enticing assets that other teams are really looking for, unless you're willing to dismantle the stars, right? Unless you're willing to trade out of the main guys. And the main guy, that may well come to pass. We're going to hear Kevin Durant's name. We've started to hear Kevin Durant's name already. If you can't find a taker for Bradley Beal and you want to make a big swing, the only ways to get that done would be to move one of your other main superstars. And I don't think it's going to be Devin Booker. So it's, is Phoenix actually going to get something done with Kevin Durant? I think that becomes one of the most interesting things to watch over the next 48 hours. But yeah, all of this stems from and smacks of desperation, because you don't spend the money that Joe Lacob and Matt Ishbia have spent, and you don't make the moves that they've made with an eye toward being ninth. You make those moves with an eye toward lording over the Western Conference and competing for championships. And when that doesn't happen, people start to get a little bit itchy.
The Warriors and the Suns could be desperate. They have both been linked to Jimmy Butler in the Heat, and while he devalues himself to force Miami to trade him, he also devalues himself in the eyes of everyone around the league. He wants to go to Phoenix so badly he won't sign an extension with the Warriors. I would think there's a lot of teams that are doing a lot of talks now at the trade deadline, but they aren't even talking about him anymore. Has he painted himself into a corner, or is something going to happen? And the question is locally, if something does happen, does it take more than two teams, and can the Jazz get in on it and help themselves somehow?
Yeah, I think that is the right read on the landscape. If anything is going to happen, the only direct path for Jimmy Butler to get where he wants to go, which by all reports is the Phoenix Suns, and basically because he thinks that there's maybe one team that's on tilt enough to offer him the full scale extension that he's looking for, which is Matt Ishbia's Phoenix Suns, because as we know, they haven't met a double down they couldn't triple down on. So he wants to get there. The only direct path to do it is Bradley Beal going out. Miami does not want to take on Bradley Beal's contract if Bradley Beal even wants to leave, and he has the no trade clause that complicates this whole thing. Everybody knows the lay of the land there. So if you are Miami and you don't want to take in Bradley Beal, you need to find a third team, or at least a third team, maybe a fourth and a fifth team, to be able to offload salary and move pieces around the chessboard to be able to carve out the financial space to make this all work. Phoenix needs to be able to, because also we're talking about teams that are dealing with apron considerations and how much money can you send out versus how much money are you allowed to accept back in, all these sort of like arcane minutia of the collective bargaining agreement. You wind up needing teams to kind of grease the skids. You need places to park salary. You need teams with exceptions that are willing to take something in for nothing except for maybe a draft pick or two. All those sorts of teams that can sort of ease the burden of making a deal like this happen. But to me, all the names are running together now because I'm on very little sleep, and it's the trade deadline week. The Beal concern is the paramount one. It's Jimmy Butler can't get where he wants to go unless somebody decides they really, really want him. And if Bradley Beal can't go, if no one wants to bring on Bradley Beal, or if Bradley Beal doesn't want to go anywhere, then I don't see how that connects to Phoenix. Which leads to, is Jimmy Butler, does he wind up in the game of musical chairs, hearing the music kind of about to stop, and saying, all right, maybe I reconsider my idea that I wouldn't extend in Golden State, or don't trade for me Memphis or whatever. And then does one of these teams wind up getting a potential difference maker for 50 cents on the dollar? It's certainly possible. I think one thing that I've learned, at least in this atmosphere, everybody thought this was going to be a quiet deadline where the biggest name moved was Cameron Johnson, and then everything went nuts. So whatever projections we can make about like how likely something is to happen today, probably going to look stupid in a few hours. So right now, I would say if I was a betting man, I would bet Jimmy Butler is not going to wind up where he wants to go. But that's why I'm not a betting man.
We wait with this rebuilding project of the Jazz, and they've made peripheral. Danny Ainge talked about big game hunting. They haven't been able to do that yet. They've got some guys that I think some people would want. You got Collins and Clarkson. I don't think Kessler is going to be available, and marketing through contract rules can't be traded until the summer. You see them being able to do anything that would be a little more significant than exchanging second-round draft choices?
I think if they're factoring into deals, and I expect them to factor into more deals moving forward, but my guess is that it is more likely to be as that connective tissue piece, right? As the sidecar to the main attraction. And that I can understand being frustrated if I'm a Jazz fan by that level of inaction. It's hard to keep the longest view in the room when the scenery around you seems to be changing so much, right? And when I see myriad reports about Walker Kessler being like as close to untouchable as there is in the league, like I like Walker Kessler a lot, and I think that was a pick that has proven out to be a really sound decision and somebody who has returned great value for the franchise. But I struggle to understand why that would be true. If there's a market, again, hypothetically, just throwing spaghetti at the wall, if the Lakers are coming and saying, all right, we just traded away our only big guy, we need a center, can we get into a conversation with a 2031 first-round pick in Austin Reeves or whatever, something like that? it strikes me as kind of stunning that would be not something that the Jazz would do. And maybe that's not true. Maybe that is now outdated information, and the Jazz would be willing to entertain more of those things. But the Jazz have put themselves in kind of a corner where, yeah, you're rehabilitating the value of somebody like John Collins, whose star had fallen quite a bit since that playoff series in Atlanta. But to what end? If you are the sort of the rehabilitation ground, but you're not willing to move off of that guy, or you're not creating an atmosphere in which that showcased player can show how he fits into the framework of a contender that makes him a more palatable choice, it's tough to see where the value comes in there. So, I don't know. To me, I look at it and I see that as a team that is like Danny Ainge, with his level of patience and with the big picture understanding that he's got, is going to keep looking at this and saying, I'm not doing a deal just to do a deal unless it gets me exactly what I want. And I think on a long enough timeline, maybe that turns into a successful building strategy. I can understand frustration with it. It feels like it's taken an awful long time to get to the fireworks factory.
Will the fireworks factory go full bore this summer? The new TV deal kicks in, so the salary cap goes up, the luxury tax, all the financial stuff that seems to be shooting down a lot of deals. Should the Jazz hold on to their assets because there'll be a lot more possibilities because the money changes this summer?
Yeah, I think that, when you get to the summer, that obviously moves you past the restriction date on Lauri Markkanen. Mm-hmm. Obviously, we've seen that players of Lauri's caliber, and specifically Lauri, had plenty of interest over the summer, and players of Lauri's caliber are drawing significant interest on the market. This transaction cycle, I would imagine that only continues when we get into the summertime, where there, as you mentioned, the finances change and you've got more picks unlocked and more teams that have more willingness to sort of do more moves. And everybody that tries to make something happen now gets to 6 months from now and is like, well, that didn't work. We got to shuffle the deck again, see what happens. The short answer is just, if you don't find something that puts you on the fast track to being the kind of team you want to be between now and Thursday 6 p.m., then don't. It's not. The Jazz are not in a position right now where just like activity for the sake of it is going to solve any problems. Obviously, I would imagine that everybody in the building would like things to be further along than they are right now, but it's why you hire Danny Ainge to dismantle the past iteration of the team. It's why you hire a super young head coach in Will Hardy and give him a really long runway. It's why you sort of make all the moves that have been made to bring in all this, draftable talent, this cost-controlled young talent, and saying we're going to sort of churn through all this and figure it out and see who winds up being part of the structure. So if it's maybe Jordan Clarkson, if it's maybe there's a market for Colin Sexton, sure, I think that makes sense now. But if you're not seeing something that's like, we can get in and be the team that gets the insert all-star caliber player here, then it would seem to me to make a lot of sense for them to keep their powder dry, wait, see what kind of conversations pick up whatever picks around the margins they can get now, and then see what options might be available to them in the summertime when all of the things that whatever restrictions they're facing now are gone and new possibilities might open up.
Well, that was a lot in a very little time, Dan. Not bad for a guy who's got no sleep.
Well, the problem, it manifests in me just talking a mile a minute, so I hope any of it made sense, guys.
Dan, we appreciate a few minutes. Thanks for joining us.
My pleasure, guys. Take care.
Dan Devine, senior NBA writer for Yahoo Sports. Your feedback coming up next. Yak, should we give one another pair of Jazz tickets? 801-575-ZONE. Caller 12 right now, 801-575-ZONE. Wins a pair of tickets to watch the Golden State Warriors tomorrow night at the Delta Center. Warriors and Jazz tomorrow night. Caller 12, 801-575-ZONE. Right now, 801-575-9663. Join Hans and Scotty G Monday from noon to 3. They're going to be at Minky Couture in Layton, 1782 Woodland Park Drive. What better way to say I love you than with an original, cozy, and classy Minky Couture blanket? DJ and PK, it's 97.5 The Zone.